Well, hello everyone. Mike with Spray Jones coming to you with another spray foam installation video. If you're new to this channel, my name is Mike. I'm the owner of Spray Jones. I produce content on spray foam products. The spray foam you see going on is my guys, and we're putting it on here in Canada. And I give you information throughout the industry to keep you up to speed on the tips, the tricks, the good, the bad, the ugly, so you can stay educated and out of the myths. Well, today we're going to talk about times of the year. There's 4 seasons to the year. Where we are in Canada, it gets really tricky in the cold weather. Basically, 2 seasons are half decent to spray in, and 2 seasons are lousy. And you'd be surprised that we fight a lot of things in the summertime. So let's talk practically in terms of installation of either open cell or closed cell foam and what time of the year has to do with your projects. Well, there's certain aspects that the project is going to be best done at summertime or springtime or what have you. So we always want things to be warm. We want things to be dry. Heat is a major component to making spray foam work, because when there isn't sufficient heat in the air or in the substrate temperature, then the heat is going to be pulled out of the spray foam. The spray foam needs a reaction, a chemical reaction, in order to rise up and become foam instead of being just a hard plastic laying on the ground. So if you have warm foam being sprayed onto a cold substrate, cold ground, cold wall, a lot of that heat comes out of the spray foam and gets put into the structure to warm it up. And then you're going to have a hard, dense, or improperly sprayed spray foam in extreme situations where it's really, really cold. The other thing is, when you have cold substrates, you have risk of having moisture. You have condensation. You have the right amount of humidity in the air. You have the right amount of cool substrate, and you can have damp conditions lingering. So the name of the game throughout every single season is for things to be warm, above freezing, and things to be dry. Dry is very, very critical, because you cannot spray to water. You can't spray to things that are damp. Think about situations that you would be expecting to paint in. That's what you want to have for spray foam. You want to have your humidity levels down, and you want to have your substrate temperature warm. Ideally, we want to be as close to room temperature as we can, and we want to have some sort of a neutral humidity level somewhere between 34 to 40 some odd percent. So what does that mean for summertime, for instance? Well, summertime can be a difficult season when it gets really, really warm. And the reason being is that it's hard on the guys, it's hard to move. Ceilings and walls and buildings that have no insulation in them and no HVAC can get sweltering hot inside. And so you have to pick and choose when you want to spray these. A lot of times in the summertime projects, we'll go in early in the mornings if we can. You get into a metal building, a metal Quonset, and you get the sun beating down on the roof deck. You get to be extremely hot, and you keep turning your temperatures down, and your spray foam just doesn't want to spray nice. And the reason being is that it's just too warm, and it's getting too agitated and too excited, and it just plays with your pattern. Likewise, high humidity conditions can play with issues with the gun, issues with your pattern, issues with foam just sticking, because if you get an extremely wet situation, like it just rained outside, or it's been high humidity, muggy temperatures all week or all that day, you can be fighting, because the isocyanate it reacts with moisture. So moisture in the air can start to polymerize and get it to pre-set up before its design time, and it just makes things sticky and gluey, and the patterns don't hold up on the gun, and you're just fighting it. You're fighting it, not necessarily sticking. You can get it to stick just fine a lot of times until things get really saturated and wet. But if you're in high humidity, it just makes for a difficult application time. It's hard to control your thicknesses, hard to get the foam to cooperate. So what we want to see is we want to have the structure dry as possible. And when we go into winter time, this becomes tricky, where we have metal buildings. Metal wants to condense. There's no insulative quality to it. There's a small amount of thermal mass to it as well. So you take metal structures and you start warming them up, or even concrete structures, you start warming them up. You're going to be pulling a lot of putting a lot of heat into that substrate is going to have a chance to condense and drip and form moisture on it, or form even frost in the situation of large thermal mass such as concrete. So these substrates can be very difficult to spray when you've got very, very cold sub-zero temperatures where it's freezing. In fact, what I will do is I will just stop spraying metal buildings come the fall. And when it comes to concrete, like a crawl space or a basement or something like that, and it's cold outside, we're spraying to a concrete wall, they're going to have the heat on for many, many days ahead of time. They're going to have to warm it up. They're going to have to dry it out. They're going to have to allow the heat to soak in and saturate in and start to warm the substrate up. And that can be a real problem. I've had one individual, they got really frustrated. They had a crawl space, forgot to insulate it on a new building, said, "Can you come out and do it?" And we went down into the crawl space and it was just dripping wet everywhere. And we said, well, you're going to have to put a lot of heat to it, and a lot of fans and a lot of air moving, dehumidify it, get the air moving through, pick up the moisture with dry air, get it warmed up, get it dried out, and get it sprayed. They didn't want to hear that, because now they're into a lot of cost and a lot of time and a lot of playing around. Likewise, when you're into structures that don't have ground, like they've got ground that's exposed, open earth, that can change the humidity levels. We've had that in a number of commercial buildings where they haven't poured floors yet. And you've come in and it's just been exposed soil inside the metal building. So they've done a grade beam, they put the building up, they put the roof on, but they haven't poured the cement in the middle yet. And that can be really difficult to control humidity levels. Things can get out of hand where you very, very quickly you start to put heat into the structure and it becomes a very wet, damp substrate. So you have to be careful that warmth and you're not pulling the heat up out of the ground, pulling the moisture up out of the ground, I should say, and making the structure excessively wet. So warm and dry is what we want. And when it comes to wood structures, like a wood house, we'll start from the top and work our way down. We'll put indirect fired heaters inside, not propane, open flame. We want to have indirect fired diesel or indirect fired systems outside where the combustion is not being sent into the space, preferably. And we want to keep a dry heat inside the building. And a lot of times, wood structures, if they've been open to the elements, which almost all of them have, you need to let them bake for a number of days. I suggest that you go and put the heat on and let them bake out for at least 48 hours prior to trying to spray them. And the reason being is there's just going to be moisture from when it rained and when things were laying in the snow, and just moisture accumulates throughout the construction period, and it gets into the cracks and it gets into the crevices. And if you're into a freezing cycle, the wood can soak up and hold a lot of that moisture, and then when it gets cold, it doesn't release it very quickly or very easily. So putting indirect fired heat inside the structure, letting it bake out, roast out for 2 days, 3 days, depending on the size, is a good. Then it sort of kiln dries it from the inside out, gets it very, very dry, and then your substrate's good to go, and your foam's going to stick, both open cell and closed cell foam. So that's a good way of baking it out. And the same thing with the metal buildings. Like if you are going to get favorable conditions where you see the weather's going to be cooperative, where it's not going to be extremely cold outside, and you can put heat on in the inside, I suggest the heat be put on early, let it bake at least a day before you're going to expect to be in there, because you're going to find that the building just needs to warm up. Every nut, bolt, screw, superstructure, just let everything warm up, and the metal start to re-equalize to the temperature that you're going to want to be spraying at, and it will allow any accumulated cold or condensation that's dripped into a crack or something like that to dry out, and then you just don't have a problem when you get to that part of the seam and the spray foam hits it. I've seen it where on a wood structure, everything was dry to the touch, looked dry, but it wasn't. It wasn't dry because the moisture was in the seams of the wood, and it was sub-zero, it was freezing inside there, but the foam is certified to do it. And as soon as hot foam hits icy, frozen in moisture into wood, what's it going to do? It's going to release it. It's going to melt it, and it's going to want to pop the foam off. So adhesion issues with the studs, adhesion issues with the substrate right away. You knew it right away. Just within the first 2 minutes of spraying a bay or something like that, boom, it's crickling and crackling and popping and coming right off. It's moisture trapped inside the wood, and you just got to stop and start baking that structure out, get it dry, get it warm. Same thing with floors. Like floors can be a real problem if they're damp. You need to dry them out, such as like gravel floors, or you're going to be spraying over top of an open crawl space or something like that for a liner. You've got to warm those substrates up, get them dry. That means putting heat down there. Cool and wet is a bad combination. In a dark crawl space, you got to get moisture flowing through them, not just in them, to wick the moisture out of it. And it can be a game where you're on a treadmill for a while. You can be really throwing a lot of air and a lot of heat at it for a while, and it takes quite a bit for quite a while to finally gain ground on it where it starts to dry out. And then as soon as it's drying out, you hit it right away, and you hit it fast, and you hit it hard, and you can get going. So warm and dry is what we want to see. And then we want to, most important, if you've stayed this long, 10 minutes into my video, pick your battles. Like, you want to arrange the structures if you have a choice, to try and spray in good weather and in good times of the year. But that's not always your choice. Some jobs you have to turn down. Some jobs you have to say no. You can't just go and spray something in the middle of really cold or really wet seasons. Sometimes you can't spray something when it's going to be extremely record high heat and record high humidity levels. You just have to pick another time. So you have to be patient as an installer, and you have to be patient as the end recipient, that if things aren't lining up and things are going to be a battle that you fight, stand back, fight another day, pick another day, and come at it at a different time when the conditions will align. That way you'll get the installation that you need. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not. But I always think it's possible to stop when things aren't aligning to your favor and just back off and say, we've got to wait. And we've done that a number of times. Commercial buildings, residential buildings, agricultural buildings, we've on all of them, we've had to say, not today, tomorrow, or let's try next week, or what have you. And always the clients are not going to be happy. Some of them are really unhappy, but they'll be more happy when they get the job that they're expecting to have, right? Properly installed, and away you go. So hope this makes sense. Hope this helps you guys out. I think it will. Share, like, and subscribe. Lay a comment. Lay a question. Let's see what you guys have to say. Talk to you soon.